We are live. All right, let's start out introductions. My name is Rob Keller. I was born and raised in Appleton. Moved to Greenville in 2013. I got married in November of 2002. My wife and I raised 8 kids together, one from our gene pool. Raised 7 through foster care. Some of my hobbies: traveling, love hiking, exploring, active outside, just playing with my kids. My wife played football, wrestling, rugby, basketball. I coached all my kids in most of those sports. Love cooking, just hanging out with my family and friends. I started in the Appleton Plant Press Department in July of 2000. I switched to ASF EHS department in April of 2025, so fairly recently. In my time at Appleton Plant on the production floor, I got to go to Terre Haute, Indiana, worked on a couple presses there, went to Fremont, Ohio, worked on the rigid lines there as a packer. That was pretty simple, just manual labor, just pack and go. And then I worked in the Shelbyville, Kentucky healthcare plant. I worked in the press department, rewinding and laminating, so all 3 production departments there. The reason I work safe, I enjoy living my life without restrictions, independently. I really enjoy doing my hobbies, playing with my kids, doing housework, as weird as that sounds. And I know I'm getting old and I don't need help slowing me down. Prime example, about 6 months before these 2 pictures were taken, that is Banff National Park in Canada, Canadian Rockies. 6 months before that was taken, my son and I were playing basketball. A bunch of his friends were playing at the Appleton YMCA. They passed me the ball. All I was doing was I caught the ball and rotated like this, and I ruptured my plantar fascia on my right foot. It didn't completely tear, it was just enough to cause like a golf ball sized knot in the bottom of my foot. Took about 6 to 8 weeks for it to heal up, so I was able to enjoy the trip, but that's one of the stories. My topic today is HIRARC Risk Assessment Facilitator Training. What is HIRARC? It is a risk management tool. Effectively identifies hazards, realistically assesses the risks, and strategically implement risk control measures. An application, there's a task-based application and an asset-based application. Task-based addresses the human side, the behavior-based processes like ergonomics or wearing your PPE. An example is unpacking your old film. You're taking all the stretch wrap off, the banding, the header boards, the clips, all that stuff. You gotta be careful where you put in your hands. Asset-based focuses on the production and support equipment and their environment, like the autonomous machine functions. Example of that is auto splicing rolls, like on unwind turret or on the rewind. There's also combination where the employees are interacting with the equipment. An example of that is changing a silly roll on one of the coders. It's kind of a step-by-step process where the machine has to do a part, the employee has to get in there and do something, adjust the machine some more, kind of goes back and forth. That's an example of a combination. The objectives for this training: all risk assessment facilitators should understand this by the end of the training. The role of this facilitator, the requirements of the risk assessment process, the steps to the risk assessment process, how to apply the risk matrix, actions needed in response to a risk score, how to select controls based on risk, how you implement new controls, how you will evaluate the effectiveness of new controls, how you plan to implement your risk assessment process. the scope. This process applies to all routine and non-routine activities, existing and new operations, construction and demolition, co-workers, temporary workers, contractors, visitors, pretty much anyone that steps foot in your plant in the production areas, and well, I mean, as long as they're on your property, you're responsible for them. This process will be followed to achieve compliance with risk assessment requirements associated with applicable EHS standards. These specific standards I fished out of AMCOR documents, so this is very specific to AMCOR. CR1 is machinery, CR2 is fire prevention, CR4 working at heights, CR5 traffic management, CR6 confined space, CR7 electrical, CR8 lifting equipment. Key risk is KR, manual handling or ergonomics, KR3 hazardous materials, KR5 asbestos, KR6 construction safety, KR8 working alone, KR10 PPE, and GM is general management, management of change. That's kind of like the follow-up once a risk assessment is taken care of. This HIRARC process will be modified for situations that require a more prescriptive risk assessment process. If just a basic one isn't enough to hash out what the risks are, you may have to dive deeper and get some assistance from outside sources or vendors. Examples include CR1 machine guarding risk assessments. A couple weeks ago, we had Peeper Automation come in and do an assessment on Coder 19 for us because there was a lot of moving parts that, because it's such a vintage machine, it needed a little extra TLC. Critical risk one for robotics and automation, or automation cell risk assessments. That's a whole nother beast. Robotics, it's not really new, but it's very precise. Like, there's a lot that can go wrong with one little hiccup. Critical risk 3, lockout tagout risk assessments. Alternative methods, that's when some of the vintage equipment that we have, some of it's hard to lock out and take out because like the environment has confined spaces and stuff where you just can't get in there and appropriately lock it out and take it out. CR6 confined spaces, that can be very touchy because there can be other factors that work in there with air quality and fall protection and stuff like that. And then other environmental management like DOT, RCRA, EPA, those kind of things where there's other more stringent regulations. Then there's also risk assessment results shall be considered in the development or revision of standard operating or procedures or SOPs and work instructions. Risk assessments shall reference written standard operating procedures and work instructions, the formal documentation part. Risk assessments shall be completed or reviewed as part of the management of change process, the follow-up part. A risk assessment shall be performed during the design phase of machinery, equipment, or processes. You want to make sure before you do the work that it's addressed before you get to it, so you don't have to redo it. It is critical to establish a formal site-level written assessment procedure. Site procedures must, at minimum, meet AMCOR Flexibles North America risk assessment procedure requirements. That's another AMCOR specific each site, because no two sites do the exact same thing. They have to have their own procedure. All risk assessments will incorporate the AMCOR Global EHS Guidance, GD2 EHS Risk Matrix. We'll talk more about that shortly, unless a specifically prescribed risk assessment is utilized, like the one that we used from Peeper a couple weeks ago. All risk assessments shall be documented to support legal compliance and ongoing risk reduction activities. That's kind of a liability. All risk assessments will follow the same series of steps identified in the section, the risk assessment process. All risk assessments will follow the same hazard control hierarchy identified in the section, risk reduction and control measures. We'll get to that shortly. Risk assessments shall be facilitated by a qualified person. That's going to be who we're training. Risk assessments shall be reviewed for accuracy at minimum every 3 years as part of the management of change process, as part of incident investigators, or sooner if required per local regulations. That's usually if an event were to occur where OSHA would be notified. The risk assessment process is a series of logical steps to ensure hazards are properly identified, risks are evaluated, and appropriate risk reduction and control measures are taken. The key elements of risk assessment include the following. You want to set your assessment team and scope. Choose your team wisely. Make sure they understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're going to do it. Identify the process, activity, and tasks when you're identifying risks. Identify the hazards of each task. Assess the risk from each task. Implement risk mitigation and control measures. Assess further risk reduction and control needs with additional control measures. That's kind of the follow-up after the initial assessment and implementation, and then management of change to follow up. Process steps. This is more towards the facilitator now. Set the assessment in team and scope. The risk assessment process relies on the knowledge, expertise, and experience of individuals familiar with tasks and hazards associated with the applicable process or system. Each risk assessment team shall be led by a qualified facilitator, competent in the standard and risk assessment processes. You want to make sure that you have people from the floor that are familiar with the process that's going to be assessed. Maybe some of your process engineers, your project engineers, supervisors, maybe some of the material handlers, get your continuous improvement crew involved. The assessment shall include The assessment shall include equipment operators as participants. The process should also include others who can provide valuable insight. This may include production or equipment assistants, setup personnel, plant supervision and leads, maintenance personnel, material handlers, engineering personnel. Information used to conduct risk assessments shall include, but may not be limited to, the following. Written work instructions, formal documentation, controlled documents preferably, equipment operating instructions, usually coming from the manufacturer of the equipment, results from prior risk assessments, if that's available, training documentation, SAMS incident data that's AMCOR specific, workplace organization and space limits, the frequency of time and task, like time studies, and equipment design drawings. This is a little snapshot of the information gathering worksheet. We'll go through that in a little bit. More of the facilitator training. Identify tasks for each activity of the process. Each activity shall be broken down into individual tasks. So you're going to take, like we were talking about before, unwrapping a roll. You break down where the header boards go, what do you do with the roll wrap, the banding, how you stage it on the cart or by the hoist, what you do with the roll after you're done taking care of it. This will include all intended tasks as well as potential upset conditions and associated unplanned tasks. What if something goes wrong? You have to get the supervisor involved, maintenance. The assessment shall include activities associated with different operating modes and intervention procedures, including when the process or machine does not operate as intended. These should include, but again, not limited to, normal operation, including startup and shutdown, setup, cleanup, maintenance and service, upset conditions, equipment installation or modifications, decommission or removal of the equipment, construction and demolition. Identifying hazards. This kind of starts off the process of the HIRARC actual assessment. Each activity consists of a series of tasks. The hazards of each task should be identified individually. The evaluation should include human factors such as decision-making, error, and improper use of equipment. I mean, it happens no matter how hard you try, no matter how much experience you have. All right, HIRARC itself. It's an acronym, the HIRARC. Hazard identification, pretty simple. Recognize and describe potential risks. Considerations to look for are location and task or the task or process being performed. Conditions, whether it's in changeover, run, upset, and you want as much info as possible. You want detail in there so that you can get an accurate picture of what's being done. This is where it is on the worksheet that we'll be going through here. On the worksheet, this side is for the hazard identification. This side is for the risk assessment. The first column is the task. The next set of columns is the condition of machine when the task or the work is being performed. And the third column is the description of all hazards. That's where you want to include like things like ergonomics, pinch points, confined space. Is there lockout takeout requirements? Is there fire safety, like grounding and bonding that needs to happen? Labeling for like hazardous material, like in ink rooms. Process steps. Assessing risk. The EHS risk matrix shall be used for all EHS risk assessments unless using prescribed risk assessment. All risk assessments shall include an evaluation of the initial risk and an evaluation after risk reduction measures are implemented. When performing risk assessments for activities other than those with prescribed risk assessment tools, the likelihood of an event expected to occur from an incident shall be identified using the following criteria. Probable is expected to occur. 2 is occasional. Expected to occur once annually. Again, this is AMCOR specific. I would think that it would probably be more than once a year that would be expected, but remote, expected to occur once in 3 years, or improbable, not expected to occur at all. The likelihood of occurrence of the hazardous event can be influenced by the following factors. Available safeguards, current safety devices and safety systems. That's talking about what came with the machine, like what was engineered into it by the manufacturers of the machine. System performance, reliability, history, and failure modes. Operational or maintenance demands of the task. Possibility of failure of safeguards if like the light curtain has a faulty cord. It's happened in the Appleton plant before. The skill level required to conduct the task. The competence of all persons performing the task. That kind of goes back to the human behavior aspect of it. Conditions of the work environment, poor ergonomic conditions, tight spaces, unorganized work area, high or low temperatures, poor visibility, noise and vibration, task frequency, how often are you bending over to change the sleeve on that press, and work pace. The risk assessment portion of HIRARC. This is where you're evaluating the probability and severity of the identified hazards from the identification. This is going to address the original controls and condition and the control tier. And then it also includes the realistic severity and the likelihood and probability of the task. This is on the right side of the worksheet. Again, the original controls and control tier, the realistic severity, likelihood, and probability. This is our likelihood calculator. This is the actual risk matrix that we use. When we apply it, again, the original controls and control tier are the next column to the right of the hazard identification. It includes the elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE. That's part of the hierarchy. Realistic severity, you'll be getting that from down here. And the likelihood and probability. That includes factors of engineering controls, training, procedures, activity frequency, the critical risks that we talked about before, the skill level, proximity to harm, how close are you to it? It might be dangerous, but if it's 20 feet away, safety by distance, human influence, history of occurrence, and remaining uncertainty. You will find the far right, likelihood final, matches up with the far left column. The final risk, you take what you got off the severity, say you got a moderate, which would be here for severity, but I mean, occasionally happens, you're at a 6. Not the worst, but it's also not ideal. Next, risk control. Implementing elimination or mitigation measures. Elimination is the best, that's what you want to aim for. Not very realistic though. Realistically, you want to look at the worst, like the most realistic worst case scenario. I mean, taking a roll or unwrapping a roll from a pallet, it could fall off the header boards and roll up someone's leg and break it, but that's probably not going to be what's happened. Gravity's probably going to stop it before it gets there. I'm not saying it can't happen. All right, this. Oh, that reminds me, I gotta hand these off.
Is this a silly roll change out?
Yep, this is Coder 19. Matt, you missed this?
Oh, love it.
The setup's a little different than ours. We don't have to use shucks like that.
This is a very unique one. This is the only
One of the
coder.
older ones, right?
Yeah, this is the only coder that maintenance does their silly roll changes. Otherwise, the operators and assistants.
We do, our maintenance guys do ours, but we call in contractors, but we don't use shucks and stuff like that. They're
Oh,
different when
okay.
we take it out. I was just curious.
How often does Afton Plant change out their silly rolls? Because from what I remember, it's not very often.
It's not super frequent. It kind of depends on the material that we're running. Like when you switch out a cast,
Oh, yeah.
you'll change it.
Right.
So
Ours is like once a week, but we have some damage problems happening. That we're
yeah,
getting
or
to it.
if damage pops up,
Yeah.
that increases how often you're changing them.
Right.
But generally, like once a month, when you change from cast to something else, to the color wheel or something.
Okay. At ASF, it seems like every day one of them is going through a silly roll change.
There's
But
9 coders.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but they also have, they could do 2 a week on some of them. All right, what I handed out was the risk assessment worksheet. You don't have to fill it out, it's just,
Reference.
yeah, reference for, if you'll watch, you'll see they have lockout, takeout out, down here. There's lifting equipment, there's gonna be, there's gonna be moving moving machinery, ergonomics, he's kinda slouched over there. This one, you'll see a little bit more. So what they do is they back this section of the machine out to get access to the silly roll here. You can see the lockout, tagout. There's actually here. Thermal energy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to take care of before you get to the next step. I mean, electrical safety. A lot of stuff you gotta watch out for here.
Ours doesn't back out like that, so
No.
completely different
Well,
machines.
That's the
Yeah.
only coder that does
Yeah, I was
that.
gonna say, when I saw this, and even like the way the dryers are formed and everything, it's a very unique
Yep.
machine. Only one like that in 25 years that I've seen that.
I'm gonna laugh when somehow our new coder comes in and it's set up like this.
It
Instead of like
might
our
be over.
engines will pull down.
Because that's all I've seen too in 25 years. All right, role of this facilitator. In the risk assessment process, it is a series of logical steps to ensure hazards are properly identified, risks are evaluated, and appropriate risk reduction and control measures are taken. Is it still going? Okay. A common process, a driving force. Risk assessment is an opportunity to engage workers to identify risk, provide control measures, and to protect coworkers. Key elements of risk assessments include the following: set assessment team and scope, identify the process, activities, and tasks, identify the hazards of each task, assess the risk, implement risk mitigation and control measures, assess further risk reduction and control needs with additional control measures, and management of change. Again, the follow-up is, in my experience, critical. That's what makes this all kind of flow and make it important. The team. Who will we include on our teams? Like we talked about before, it is vital to the process that you get buy-in from the floor employees. They're the ones that are gonna be doing the work. They're the ones that are gonna figure out how to work around it if it's not what they needed to do or it's making it worse. And those are also the ones you're protecting. Do we have internal documents to use? Is there already existing like control documents with training team if your plant has a training team? Sorry, Appleton.
Do you have one? Because we don't.
No,
do
we
it.
don't.
How do we go about requesting people to participate? How do you get them excited about this? I mean, my experience, people don't like change. They like what they're used to. It's just human nature.
Would you suggest like, hey, you know that one thing you've been complaining about for years? We're gonna try to fix it. You wanna be part of that process?
It has worked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's usually the one that does work.
Yep.
Instead of coming in and dreading being here and complaining about it every day. And
Hey, mandatory meeting, we're going through a whole bunch of hazards, you need to assign it a number. That
Yep.
doesn't work as well.
Yep.
I am on board with that. I wish everybody was.
Fix a problem that they deal with. That's the best way to include them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The process. Have we established a priority to the risk assessment process? Did we make it important for everyone involved? How will risk assessments be scheduled? Are we going to try to do it during a PM down? Are we going to shut the machine down in the middle of a run? How important is it? Is it something that can wait till the end of this campaign? Will we use the electronic form on the floor or paper? I would suggest doing it in paper and then scanning it in if you're not going to do electronic, just so you have a backup record of it. Assessing the risk. What if we have a high risk? Usually that indicates that you need to address it immediately. I'm sure there's some of the vintage machinery in the network that is at a high risk. It just hasn't been assessed yet. And who approves changes? That for Amcor, if it's over a certain dollar amount, it has to go to out of country. Yeah. I mean, you're gonna come across many questions, and there's a lot of them out there that need to be answered. Role of facilitator. You're teaching the process, you're demonstrating the process, the goal is to build consistency so that getting everyone on board from the top down and from the bottom up so that they're all on board together with it. And it is an opportunity to engage. Including them, that helps them feel empowered. It really does. We will work as a team, listen to team members, welcome input, diverse perspectives. A lot of people are going to have a lot of different ideas on how to fix things. We will learn by doing. We'll get better with experience. Perception of risk will change with time. We will find gaps in the process. That's always going to be the case. It's part of the learning opportunities. We will need to make decisions we are unfamiliar with. Also part of the learning process. We will need to prioritize. Also part of the learning process. And then, I mean, there's the unknown. You don't know what you're getting into sometimes until you start taking things apart. Any questions?
Great job.